One of the most frequently asked questions is how do we devise the programming for Seattle Philharmonic concerts? Sometimes it's all part of a grand design, and very occasionally, as is the case with the present concert, a happy accident falls into our laps. In this case, for this concert, I had to leave a space open because we knew that it was going to be occupied by the concerto played by last year's winner of our Don Bichelle competition. So the two pieces that I already had on the docket were the Lyric Suite by Edvard Grieg and the Symphony by Paul Dukas, a work that I've wanted to conduct since I was a teenager and finally have the chance to do. And of course, this was planned utterly in advance of knowing that the winner of our competition was going to play the Grieg Piano Concerto. So this sort of cheerfully evolved into a two-composer program, a Grieg first half and a Dukas second half. Further, I added to the mix the very short overture that Grieg wrote for his incidental music to Ibsen's drama Peer Gynt. Usually you hear one or both suites from Peer Gynt, but the overture, for some reason, is not done as much as it should be. Usually, if you encounter music for Peer Gynt, the first thing you hear is... But the overture really gets things off to a flying start, very energetic. There's a country fiddle solo halfway through it, except that it's played by the viola. The viola gets a chance to be crude and rude and low down and play something with a lot of open strings. And if you're familiar with the Peer Gynt suites, the only tune that you probably will recognize in the overture is a piece that occurs very late in the play, Solveig's Song. Here in the overture played by the clarinet and the oboe. And so on. So that becomes the central, slower episode in the overture, flanked by this very energetic music. The Lyric Suite is a set of 4 pieces. They were originally written for piano, and Grieg took them and slightly reconfigured them, changed the keys in a couple of places, and came up with a beautiful, perfectly formed 4-movement suite, slow, fast, slow, fast. The second movement, called the Norwegian Peasant March, is particularly delightful. I was just thinking a little while ago, it takes a chordal sequence that you might be familiar with from a song like Jeepers Creepers. But he sort of just keeps doing it and doing it and doing it as he works his way down the keyboard or the orchestra. The theme in question is... So it may be stretching a point. Jeepers Creepers. I'm sure that the composer of Jeepers Creepers did not have that in mind. And then the last movement It's the one that the orchestra enjoys playing most. It's called March of the Dwarfs, and they're a pretty malevolent little bunch. This builds to a climax. This material is played quite loudly and boldly. And then there's a central episode with a very tender violin and then a flute solo. I told my concertmaster that that's probably a very repentant little dwarf who's trying to mend his ways, but eventually it comes back to... So, no hope of rehabilitation, alas. The Grieg Piano Concerto is such a famous work. There's very little I have to say about it. I will, however, I'm going to put in a plug. I know one is not supposed to plug one's competition and one's competitors, but please, anybody who loves this piece, you must go to YouTube, look up Grieg Piano Concerto, Andre Previn, Morecambe and Wise, Morecambe and Wise, to see probably the funniest classical music spoof this side of P.D.Q. Bach, in which Andre Previn was a guest star on a British comedy program in the 1970s, in which they absolutely, I mean, it was all planned, of course, but delightfully made a fool of him, and he played along with it. It's wonderful. Andre Previn could easily have become a fine comic actor based on this little piece of film. Like Ferdig Roffet, like Gustav Holst, Paul Dukas has essentially become, in the public's mind, a one-work composer. That work, of course, being the ubiquitous and delightful Sorcerer's Apprentice. No slam on The Sorcerer's Apprentice. It is a brilliant work. It deserves every ounce of popularity that it has garnered. A shame, though, that it has eclipsed all of the other works that have come down to us, which are not that many in number. Shortly before the end of his life, Dukas, in a spasm of self-criticism, destroyed, literally threw into the fireplace most of what he had written over the last several decades, choosing to be remembered only by what he felt were his very best works. We're all the more grateful, therefore, for the works that he did leave behind: a massive four-movement piano sonata, a beautiful ballet score, La Pairie, an opera, Ariane and Bluebeard, with a libretto by Maurice Maeterlinck, the same man who wrote the libretto for Debussy's Péléas and Mélisande, and his symphony, this beautiful Symphony in C, which is, to me, the great French Romantic symphony. I'm a bit of a heretic. I value it far more highly than I do the Franck D minor symphony. I love it even more than the Bizet Symphony in C, the Chausson Symphony in B flat, even more, saints preserve me, than the Saint-Saëns Organ Symphony. I'm simply crazy about this work. If you know The Sorcerer's Apprentice, you know that Paul Dukas was capable of brilliant orchestration. You know that the man had a wonderful sense of humor. But there are aspects in the symphony of his personality that will surprise you, and I think delightfully so. There's a lyrical vein to his work that comes out several times in the outer movements, three movements, fast, slow, fast, and the slow movement will take your breath away. It is simply one of the most beautiful utterances, I think, in all of French music. Again, for those of you who are determined to hear in this symphony aspects of the composer of Sorcerer's Apprentice, you will not be disappointed. The same man who wrote gave us a similarly buoyant melody as the third subject in the first movement of the symphony. And that's not unrelated to The Sorcerer's Apprentice, but in terms of some of the lyrical moments, the second subject of the first movement is just the most delicious, lyrical, warm, sensuous outpouring. I mean, those harmonies are so rich. If we slow them down, And if that gives you any indication of what the slow movement may be like, please come hear this symphony. I guarantee you will leave a fan and need to add it to your record library immediately.